Ma'am, we'll start the session now. Ma'am, you're on mute.
Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon to all the participants and the speaker. Welcome to the afternoon session of FDP Phase 1, sponsored by AICTE, organized by the Oxford College of Engineering, Department of Biotechnology. So today we have Dr. Chitra as our speaker for this session. Dr. Chitra holds a MS degree in pharmacy with specialization in natural products from National Institute of Pharmaceutical Education and Research, Chandigarh, and her doctorate is in the field of natural products from the same institute from the year 2005. She completed her Bachelor's of Pharmacy from Dr. MGR Medical University, Tamil Nadu in the year 1999. Besides being a gold medalist in her undergraduate as well as postgraduate, Dr. Chitra also holds an MBA degree in marketing from IGNOU and postgraduate diploma in intellectual property rights from National Law School, University, India. She is a registered patent agent and an advocate having a wide experience in techno-commercial and techno-legal background. She has several research articles and patents to her credit. She has hands-on experience on isolation, characterization, and biological testing of natural products with respect to both small molecules and macromolecules, synthesis of chemical products and biological assay, including screening of compounds in vitro and in vivo. Dr. Chitra began her career as an assistant manager at a pharma company in Delhi, managing the product life cycle through project management techniques, coordinating for regulatory approvals and conducting successful business negotiation with clients. Subsequently, she moved on to a reputed IP law firm in Delhi, where she handled patent filing, prosecution, and oppositions. As a part of the earlier firm, her responsibilities included strategic advice on crafting and developing patent portfolios, providing patentability and freedom to operate opinions, advice on regulatory law, drafting and filing of patent application, and oppositions in India and abroad as well. Dr. Chitra was part of the team which successfully handled the first compulsory license grant in India for the drug sorafenib and has also assisted in several ongoing litigations of pharmaceutical compounds in the High Court and Supreme Court of Delhi, as well as other high courts across India. She has drafted and filed more than 250 oppositions in Indian Patent Office and other jurisdictions. She has drafted and filed several hundreds of applications in the national and international forum. She has mentored and trained people for projects in management and intellectual property rights and regularly delivers seminars and lectures in several forums. Her expertise lies in advising clients, especially in the life science sector, in building, managing, and developing their portfolios of intellectual property rights. She's planned and built IP portfolios of several companies and institutions and is accomplished in conducting freedom to operate reports and providing techno-legal opinions. She is a visiting professor at several academic institutes and conducts workshops across India. Dr. Chitra, we are very delighted to have you as a speaker today here in our esteemed institution. So on behalf of staff, students and the management of the Oxford College of Engineering, we are delighted to have you and it's a welcome from our end, ma'am. So you may please start with the session.
Thank you, ma'am. I would like to keep the session open for any questions. So rather than, waiting for a Q&A session at the end, we can, if required, you can please have a chat box or, give an indication by raising the hand and I can stop and clear whatever queries you have at that stage. So the topic that has been provided to me is patent procedure and reply to examination report of patent applications related to biotech inventions. This is such a wide topic. So I have taken the liberty of, fine-tuning this topic into a few specific examples. Because biotechnology per se is huge, starting from, yeast and bread making to alcohol production, to tissue culture, to cloning of plants and animals, to artificial insemination, to organ generation and personalized medicine. Everything is biotechnology. And there are patent applications which have been filed starting from simple fermentation processes to complex monoclonal antibodies to actually vaccine technology, and nowadays on COVID also, and method of treatments and personalized medicines. And since you are a well-established biotechnology department, I'm sure that each one of you must be working on different facets of biotechnology. So while the first portion of our lecture, I will just show you as to how an Indian examination report is. The next portion of the lecture, I would like to, split it into different examples, and each example is drawn to one area so that hopefully we are able to cover or at least touch upon the various areas which are being worked by different people. However, if there are any specific questions or you want me to elaborate on any one particular area, I would be happy to do so. This is the patent examination procedure for Indian patent applications. There are many types of Indian applications that get filed. These applications can be filed directly or as a national phase application, which means that you have filed a PCT application and entered India as a part of the PCT, or you have filed this as a conventional application. Conventional application means you have filed in around about 170 or 75 countries which are a part of the Paris Convention Treaty. Like you have filed in India and you can file in US, or you have filed in US or Europe or some other country and you can enter India through conventional application. Okay, once you file the applications, you have to fulfill formal requirements, which means that you have to sign several documents saying that you are the inventor, somebody is the applicant, and therefore you are assigning the rights from the inventor to the applicant. There will also be, information that you need to give about corresponding applications, and also applications, which are substantially related to this invention. These are all known as formal procedures. After you complete all these formal procedures, within 18 months from the date of filing nowadays, or otherwise it's to be precise, after 18 months from the date of filing, the application gets published. Once the application is published, India follows a deferred examination system. Like in US, the applications which you file get automatically examined. But in Europe or in India, you have to specifically request that the patent office examines your application. There is a fee associated with it. When you do that, the applications are taken up in the order of filing the request for examination. And nowadays, the pendency in Indian Patent Office has come down to be quite low, and in about a year or year's time, you get the examination report. You have to respond to the examination report within 6 months. The 6 months timeline is extendable by another 3 months. If your examiner is satisfied, they issue the LPD or the letters patent document, which indicates that your patent has been granted. If they are not satisfied, they give another examination report. If they are still not satisfied with that examination report, either directly without giving the second examination report, they can give a hearing, or after the second examination report, they give a hearing. A person can appear in the hearing, and once the hearing is done, either the application is rejected or amended with certain claim amendments, or finally the application gets granted. All three possibilities are there. So this process is going to be similar for all examinations across the world. Okay, only the timelines differ. As you might have been covering in your earlier classes, whenever you file an application, to get the application granted, the examination is done across the globe. But when an application is getting granted, it is specifically enforceable only in the jurisdiction in which it is granted. Therefore, you have to go to each country where you want to enforce your patent and file applications in each and every country so that the applications get granted. This process is almost similar. There are some minor changes between various countries, but every country is going to examine. And based on the examination, your application gets amended and granted most often than not. Very few applications get granted without any amendment. That's probably 1 in a million. And a higher percentage of applications get rejected also. But predominantly, most applications get amended and then get granted. So you get only a few claims. The claims that you get are the boundary of your invention, and only the granted claims give you the power to enforce. I am showing a sample of an Indian examination report. If you say in the Indian examination report, the attorney to whom it is provided is addressed, the examiner is shown in the bottom, the date of dispatch of email is provided. From this day, you get 6 months. If you want extension of the timeline, you can do so once by payment of additional fee. Only once it can be done, but it can be done for 1, 2, or 3 months extension. So that means you can file for an extension before this date once, either for 1 month, 2 months, or 3 months. The fee is approximately 5,000. I'm saying official fee plus professional fee per month. Okay. So you have to take an extension before the deadline. Okay, whereas in some countries like US, even if you do not take an extension, in US the time given for response to an examination report is 3 + 3. If you don't file by the first 3 months, US provides an automatic extension, but in India, you have to take this extension before the 6 months due date. Otherwise, your application will get irreversibly abandoned. When you see the examination report, in the page, they give a lot of details. If you see the part 1, which is somewhere in between, it shows, the summary of the report. In the summary of the report, you get substantial and formal objections. What are substantial objections? Substantial objections are those which shows the application has to be discussed in view of the patents law, which is in terms of novelty, industrial step, and applicability. If you see in this examination report, the examiner has said that the claims 1 to 7 did not have any novelty, did not have any inventive step, but they do have industrial applicability. Yes. They also, in case you get a examination report from India, you will always see the section, which is the non-patentability section, which is the section 3. Okay, which is the artificial exclusions which are specified in India. In India, not only should you cross the bar of novelty, inventive step, and industrial applicability, we should also cross the bar of non-patentability or artificial exclusions, which are provided mainly under section 3. But section 4 also says that if you are using any radioactive materials, it will be non-patentable. There are some other sections, I'm not going into it, but most often than not, you get claim 3 rejections. These are known as substantiative rejections. Then you will also have some rejections which pertain to the drafting, which is like your claims are not clear, they are not concise, they are not definitive, as which has been given in the objection 3 here. They also, all novelty and inventive step rejections are given with respect to certain citations. These are known as prior art citations. In this particular examination report, there has been no patents which has been cited. It says no document cited, but sometimes or many a time here you find patent documents and here you find non-patent literatures. So both are present. Then the examiner goes on to explain why the examiner considers that the patent does not contain novelty, does not contain inventive step, and why is it considered to be non-patentable. I would like to pause. See, when a examiner is raising the objection of novelty, the examiner can award only one document. I am giving a very small, simple example. For example, if you have placed a novel vector and a sequence inside the novel vector, and you are claiming the vector containing the sequence. Okay. The examiner will say the vector containing the sequence is of novel or anticipated because one vector is found in document D1 and the sequence is found in document D2. Therefore, the vector containing the sequence is considered to be anticipated. This is not allowed, not under the grounds of novelty. Why is it not allowed? Because in novelty, the entire objection has to be contained in one document. So the examiner cannot combine two citations in one document. However, they can combine both citations under the grounds of inventive step. Okay, non-patentability is also there. Then you see clarity and conciseness and you see definitiveness. Whenever there is a biotechnological invention, you always have to be cognizant that there is another act. The another act is the National Biodiversity Act, and there is a Biodiversity Board. This act says if you are going to be using any material that you have obtained from India, we have to give royalty to the National Biodiversity Authority. Okay, and therefore always a NBA application lies. Otherwise, in your specification, you have to clearly specify that the application does not use any biological resource from India or the biological resource has been commercially procured. Otherwise, without getting the NBA permission, it is not possible to get the patent granted, and the lack of filing an NBA can induce even criminal penalties. Okay, last but not the least, they give the documents that are found on record. Any questions so far?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So I will just move to how to handle the substantiative issues. First is novelty. What is novelty? Novelty means the prior art must contain all elements of the invention as claimed, or it should be a mere mirror image of the claimed product or process. Okay, mere concept, when it is provided in the prior art, it cannot be considered as novelty destroying at all. For instance, you have given a sequence. Your sequence is say 300 base pairs. And there is a prior art which contains 150 base pairs. Or for that matter, it even contains 250 base pairs. You have either 150 or another additional 50 base pairs which are in addition to the prior art document. So the examiner at any point cannot say that The prior art document containing 150 base pairs is a novelty destroying document for your current application. Because we have to say, see, in a novelty document, the entire invention should have been set out. Usually, in a novelty destroying document, if the entire invention is set out, it means that you have not done your literature survey or prior art well. But if you have done your prior art well, you always will see there is a small change between the prior art and that of your present invention. Even if there is a small change, that change will help you overcome novelty. Because in a novelty document, even small changes cannot be explained. So this is something which is very important for you to understand while rebutting to novelty invention. However, if the examiner does not catch with that same document, they will catch as an inventive step. In inventive step, it is possible for the examiner to combine two documents. Like for example, the vector containing a sequence is an example. The examiner can say, oh, you bought a vector. This vector PCOM was already known in the prior art. Okay, then we have a sequence. This sequence is already been disclosed in this particular publication. So you have combined a known vector with a known sequence, but maybe the vector was not amenable to a sequence of this size. You just made this vector plus sequence possible. Okay, it's not a big deal. Okay, so when I read two documents together, your patent application is a mere extension of the knowledge in the prior art. When the examiner says that, it is considered to be obvious. Okay, so how do you rebut such objections? You show the examiner, see, this particular vector is only amenable for sequences of 200 base pairs. Whereas for the first time, I changed all the transformation parameters and I was able to put a sequence of 2000 base pairs inside my vector. Then what will the examiner say? Okay, fine. So how did you do it? I did it by changing the method. Then the examiner will say, okay, then you can take the method, but you cannot take the product because both the sequence is known and this particular vector is known. Then if you have a document or a scientific explanation, say for example, you say that this particular sequence by itself produces some lytic enzymes. When we have these lytic enzymes, the sequence per se would induce the vector to burst or leak. However, I made a small change in the vector which prevents the lysis of this particular vector, and therefore I deserve the product. Let me take another example. Last time we had shown that, in an anticipation, if you have a a prior art showing 150 base pairs and you have say 250 base pairs, it cannot be destroyed in novelty. But in terms of inventive step, the examiner will say, oh, there were some few base pairs. You added an N terminus, you added a C terminus. You added some sticky ends so that it can go and sit inside a vector. Okay, what is the big deal? Okay, then we say, no, sir, it is a big deal because this sticky ends is not the same sticky ends which are generally prescribed in the prior arts. Or I made sticky ends, which can help me put a double strand instead of a single strand or something else. Okay, so you have to show how the difference makes a significant difference. And unless you show that significant change or a technical improvement as to what you thought is completely a scientific innovation and not set out in the prior art, you will not get the application. So in case of an inventive step, how you rebut is you take the prior art 1, you combine it prior art 2, and you show what is the gap between combining the prior art 1 and 2 with that of your invention, and that becomes your inventive merit. More often than not, the controller says you take the inventive merit and put it into claim 1. Okay, and then your claim reads to be inventive and it is easy for you to get an application granted. Any questions?
No, ma'am.
I'm totally unclear or?
You are clear, very clear.
Okay. If you need anything, please stop. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So whenever you respond to obviousness, you have to say what is the scope and content of the prior art and what are the differences between the prior art and the claims at issue, which means your claims, and whether the difference is obvious. See, always do not think that, the all applications are filed like, Newton is sitting under the tree and apple is falling from the tree, and therefore we intend, the law of gravity was invented for the first time. 97% applications are filed for mere improvements. Okay, so even a small improvement but with a significant change, okay, can give you an application and can cross the barriers of novelty inventive step. I would like to give you a simple example, which is, quite out of biotechnology, but something that we can really equate to. Whenever this textile industry was made, they had a needle, okay, and the needle was machinized, and the needle used to go up and out of the cloth. Okay, so the up and out of the cloth, when the needle went, the needle was a straight needle, the sewing needle that we have, but machinized, it caused damage in the cloth, and the cloth used to tear at the place where the needle went because it damaged the fibers when it went up and down. So there was an invention in which the people made a small bend in the needle so that when the needle comes out, okay, it does not damage the cloth. This bend in the needle was considered to be inventive because it did not damage the cloth and it had huge industrial applicability. Think of the number of ready-made garment machines using this needle with a bend. Okay, so if you can get an inventive step and a patent application for a bend in the needle, just because it was, totally out of what other people thought, I think as biotechnologists, your potential to make a small difference is quite huge. Okay, so this is what I would like to say. I have given one more example. Say, for example, in an obviousness, an isolated nucleic acid molecule comprising a polypeptide, which is encoding a polypeptide at least 80% identical to amino acids so and so of sequence ID number 2, wherein the polypeptide binds to CD48. Now, in prior art, we have a cDNA which encodes such protein of sequence ID 2. We have a specific, when we write the draft, okay, we have placed that the gene sequence can be derived and isolated by standard biochemical methods. Then the examiner says the finding of this protein is obvious. This is the most important thing when you draft. That is why while drafting, I appreciate a Biuret test is something what each one of us are doing at every stage and at 20,000 times. But there is no need for us to, say that Biuret is known. Certain things are understood. But when you write such statements that it is known, it is done by standard biochemical methods, it was so easy to do so. You are killing your own obviousness. So this is something that you should be very careful when you draft the specification only. Because when you draft the specification and you file it, the patent office is only going to check whether you have paid the requisite fees or not. Okay, only when they examine, which is generally 1 year, 2 years, or 4 years down the lane, depending upon when you file your request for examination, they will come up with all these questions. Unfortunately, at that point, it is not possible for you to change the specification in any particular manner. When you cannot change the specification in any particular manner, at the drafting stage only, you should be careful not to make drafting pitfalls, which shows that, these were made. These were made by nature. Okay, this is another biggest pitfall that we have in biotechnology. What is made by nature is not patentable because nature deserves that patent. What is made by us or the human intervention component of a natural process is the patentable subject matter. So as and when you draft a patent, you must clearly point out as to what is human intervention and keep it in the draft and refrain from keeping all these commitments that it is known, it was easy. I injected an antigen into the mouse. The mouse made one antibody and that antibody was mine. Okay, then they will say the mouse made it. What did you do? Oh, I isolated it. Okay, you isolated it. Okay, you take the process for isolation if the process for isolation is new. But why should you deserve a patent for something which the mouse made? Then you have to say, oh, no. I gave a mixture of antigens. The mouse saw all the antigens, identified one antigen and made several antibodies out of it. I isolated all antibodies. I chose one antibody which had the maximum binding capacity to this antigen. I identified the antigen and the antibody. I also identified the epitope to which the antibody binds, and therefore I deserve a patent. Okay, but all this you cannot go and respond in the examination report without any support. So we clearly have to identify and differentiate as to what we made and place it in the specification at the drafting and the filing stage. Any questions?
No, ma'am.
We also know that there are many artificial exclusions. The biggest artificial exclusions is 3C. 3C or of our Indian Patents Act, Section 3C of the Indian Patent Act says mere discoveries are not patentable. So it says if there is a discovery of a living or a non-living thing, it is not patentable. So how is it? For example, I have gone to a seashore and I have isolated a halophilic microorganism, salt-loving microorganism. So I discovered it. So if at all maximum what you will get, the process of isolation and keeping the microorganism alive. But the microorganism per se, very difficult to obtain unless it is modified. Okay, so if you have the entire microorganism, you are supposed to submit it, take a strain number, with your biodiversity authorities. Okay, and you have to say that I'm using this microorganism for research, and as and when you file a patent application, you have to take permission from the biodiversity authorities also. And as and when a patent is granted, you have to pay royalty also. If the patent is licensed and you make money out of the patent, just because you file a patent, you need not pay royalty. But if the patent is licensed or assigned and you make money out of this patent, royalty lies to the biodiversity authority. So if you are going to have a mere isolation, okay, maximum you can get if the isolation process is novel, the process for isolating the microorganism. The microorganism per se or any discovery For example, you found another enzyme which is sitting in our body. You were the first person to find it. If at all it is possible, you can get the method of arriving at that particular enzyme, but the enzyme per se is never going to be yours. Okay, the principle is anything which is discovered belongs to the entire mankind. A patent is an individual right, whereas a discovery is a public right. When you have a public right, it is not possible to convert it into an individual right. So this is the principle of keeping section 3C, and therefore mere discoveries, mere isolated microorganism per se is not possible for us to obtain. So this is the most important objection which you will see in all biotechnological examination reports. To rebut this, you have to show human intervention. I will now go to specific examples and I will try to cover, transgenic plant cells and medical devices, drugs, monoclonal antibodies. Before I go to specific examples, are there any doubts?
So far, no.
Okay. First, I would like to touch upon transgenic and genetically modified organisms and plants. Here by organisms, I mean animals. Okay. So when you do a plant genetic transformation, okay, you cannot claim the whole plant. Not because it is bad, because there is a separate protection for the plant. It is known as the Plant Variety and the Farmers' Right Act. Okay, so when there is a separate protection, it doesn't come under the Patent Act. But if, for example, you have vectors and you have made an alteration in the plant sequence, the vector, the method of introduction into the plant, and the method of keeping it inside the plant for several traits. Okay, maybe agronomic traits like seed dormancy, herbicide resistant, insecticide resistance, disease resistance, or plant productivity in terms of stress tolerance or osmoprotectants, in terms of food or industrial traits. For example, it gives better food fibers, or the fruits get ripened quickly, or horticultural traits like, say, you have novel flower colors or increase in shelf life, or you are able to regulate the metabolic pathway. For example, in terms of biodiesel producing microorganisms, or in terms of increased oil production for sunflower or other things, all of this you will be able to get the molecular level modification in the plant genetic transformation. You should couple it with Plant Varieties Protection Act and get the entire whole plant. One best example for this is golden rice. If you see in golden rice, there are more than 70 patents. How do they start? They start with gene construction TI vectors, the plant regeneration, the plant transformation techniques, and other techniques. But you see how smart these golden rice manufacturers were, that they also did a Plant Variety and Protection Act where the plant per se, including the seed source, were protected under the Plant Variety and Protection Act. So you had certain statistical models and computer programs. These go into the Copyright Act. Okay. So, and you also have trade secrets. As you know, trade secrets do not have any official mode of protection. So whenever you have an intellectual property rights, you should always consider a gamut of protection. You should think of intellectual property rights like a dartboard, where your invention is sitting in the middle, followed by layers of protection. The layers can be several patents, but it also can be other forms of allied IP rights like copyright, Plant Variety Protection Act, statistical models, or which is copyrights, and of course you always have a trade secret. But whenever we have a plant, you should remember there is another artificial exclusion which is sitting, which is under our section 3, which is known as section 3H, which says that there is a method of horticulture or agriculture. So if you are going to say, like say for example, Monsanto cotton, okay, BT cotton. Monsanto has a lot of plant variety, the sequence, the way in which they introduce the gene, the transformation techniques, all this are there as patents. They of course have a Plant Variety Protection Act. They even have, a trademark for the seeds. But they cannot get a patent which says that method of cultivating cotton. This is not only true for method of cultivation of herb, shrubs and trees. It is also going to be true for microorganisms. For example, cultivation of algae or a new form of a known plant, or you are preparing an improved soil. Okay, or you are saying, okay, first you keep the water level in the rice cultivation for so many centimeters, and then you reduce the water level to so many centimeters. Such are methods of horticulture and agriculture. And if you have such method claims, they will be objected under section 3H of the Act. The only option is to delete the claim because there is no way to get out of the section. However, if there are agricultural equipments per se, you say that I have a different type of a hoe or I have a different type of a cradle, then those things are patentable as equipments, as devices. Okay, but method of horticultural claims, if there is an objection under 3H, sometimes the examiners will just, place all objections. But however, if the claim actually pertains to a method of agriculture or horticulture, you will not be able to get the claim, and the only resort we have is to delete the claim. How about, it's true for plants. You can get easily genetically modified plants. Okay, but how about animals? See, we worked with the silk board. Okay, so in a silk board, this was long ago, where they had modified the silkworm such that the silk is finer and more better and more shinier. It was in 1997, it was not possible to patent. But later, we could get it as a method and a sequence. Still now, it is possible to get methods and sequences for genetic modification of any organism. Okay, but the entire mouse, say for example, your cloned mouse, the entire mouse, or for that matter, even the entire silkworm, you will not get. Okay, but the method or the sequences you will be able to obtain. Okay, this closes our genetic modifications of both plants and animals. Anybody working on this area, do they have any specific questions?
No, ma'am.
Okay, I'm moving to the next. I'm looking at medical devices now. See, if you talk about medical devices, the range is very broad. Starting from an adhesive plaster to even, MRIs, everything falls under medical devices. Okay, the first subcutaneous injection has been granted a patent. Plastic disposable syringes have been granted patents. Now, auto-destruct syringes and pre-filled syringes, for the first time when they were there, they were also granted patents. So it is possible to have every small improvement patent. And again, I reiterate, for medical devices, it is absolutely easy to get patents. Okay, because there are no artificial exclusions. Most of them are improvement. You have to very clearly state the obviousness or the improvement so that you get over the obviousness rejection, and they must be fulfilling the statutory requirements. If at all some artificial exclusion may be envisaged, it is like pushing it, but they can say that it is a mere arrangement or rearrangement of devices, which is under section 3F. See, under section 3F, what we say is, say for example, you have a bucket and you place a torch on the top of the bucket. A bucket functions as a bucket and the torch functions as a torch. There is no interdependency between the bucket and the torch. So there will be 3F. So because if it is a device and it contains several parts, then the examiner will say that, two known parts you have attached with each other. But in that case also, it is very easily possible for you to say, no, the devices are interdependent on each other and the function of one part is dependent upon the other part. Then this objection of 3F can be easily removed. It is also possible that if your device is extremely big, say for example, a robotic surgical arm, then there are more than one patents which get granted to devices. Otherwise, devices are one of the most free and easy patents that you can get. I'm moving to the next set, which are vaccines and other products. This is most critical nowadays in view of COVID and COVID vaccines. There are several patent applications which has been filed now against these vaccines. Okay. I will give you an example of one of the first vaccines which was granted. Now, vaccine, the difference is it may contain attenuated but live organisms. When initial vaccines came, it was, in the court of, bursitis vaccine. The question was whether live organisms can be patented. Okay. The response was, okay, we will, earlier patents which were drawn to lyophilization of organisms, and they resulted in the death of the living organisms, and therefore it was not patentable. Then it went to the court, and the court corrected the position that the lyophilization does not cause death of organism. Since the lyophilization does not cause death of organisms, and technically it was clarified, then the question came whether living can be patented, living organisms. If you recall, discovery of living organisms cannot be patented under Section 3C. Is it a bar or can it be patented? This was a question in front of the court. The question said, finally the court answered that a mere discovery alone is barred, but living things per se is not barred. And therefore, they granted one of the first patents to a bursitis vaccine, which perpetually contained live organisms. After that, it is quite easy that you get vaccines with live organisms. The only difference is if it is going to be a single organism with an attenuation alone, then the attenuation may be obtained, but the organism per se, unless we show that the attenuation was quite difficult, if it was just a mere heat attenuation of its activity, it becomes difficult. But however, if you are going to use more than one strains or a combination of strains, like in case of polio vaccine, it becomes very easy for us to combine the mixture and obtain the vaccine. If you see, there's a lot of pneumococcal vaccines like the Prevnar, which is Pfizer's vaccine, is all patented, and a lot of companies are actually fighting over it. Okay, and if you go and do a research on the Prevnar vaccine, you will find quite interesting case laws regarding this. But the bottom line that I want to tell you is, yes, vaccines can be patented. You just have to ensure that it is not a mere single strain and the strain is not a mere discovery. Any questions? No questions. Please don't hesitate to ask in case of any clarifications. Okay. I am moving to another biopharmaceuticals. This is actually, PEG, 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 interferon. Okay, there are two types of PEG interferons, alpha PEG interferon and beta PEG interferons, both of which was available in the market. So Schering-Plough, this is Schering-Plough's molecule. In Schering-Plough's molecule, there was a PEG interferon. Okay, and they said that this is my molecule, and therefore they had a infringement case against one of the Indian manufacturer, Virchow. Okay. So the issue was, the examiner, the question was whether one is a generic of other. See, in case of pharmaceuticals, if we consider the size of the molecule to be like a pinpoint, in case of biotechnology, as all of you will appreciate, it is the size of a football. So a generic in pharmaceuticals is not akin to the biopharmaceuticals or biogenerics or biosimilars, if you can use the exact term. So the question was whether this molecule has the same kind of look or whether it actually followed. In this, Virchow was able to show that both were pegylated molecules. The pegylation is sitting at different positions. And because the pegylation was sitting at different positions, okay, then the difference was there in terms of bioequivalence. And because there was a difference in bioequivalence and pegylation and the basic structure of the molecule, it was considered that this particular molecule is different from that of the other molecule. Okay. But you should remember that difference should cause a technical difference. For instance, Exendin, okay, which is an insulin derivative, was not granted a patent because what they did is, this is also true for Prolis. In Prolis, okay, there were only change in the amino acid sequences between prolin and lysine. That is why it is known as Prolis insulin. In case of Exendin, what they had done is they had replaced like amino acids with like. Like serine was replaced with threonine and histidine with that of lysine. That is amino acid containing NH2 containing amino acids and hydroxyl containing amino acids were replaced. So the examiner said that in case of Exendin, that whatever you were doing is but expected because you did a like replacement. And it is a matter of routine experimentation, because if I were to look at it first, what I would look at it is only replace like with like. So Exendin patent could not get through. But in case of Prolis, they were able to show that just by changing the sequence of the amino acids, I was able to get a much better activity. This was also true for insulin hexamer. Okay, if you see, this is also a patent which was fought by Eli Lilly. If you actually see, insulin earlier was given as a monomer, but when it went inside the body, along with the zinc molecule, it used to become a hexamer. So what Eli Lilly did was to give, hexamer insulin well in advance. So people said, oh, what you did was, to just, give, you knew it is going to form a hexamer. Okay. But Eli Lilly said, no, I came up with a hexamer outside the body. And because of this is humulin. Because of this, my people are able to take one shots, and therefore the bioavailability is drastically changed. Okay, yes, I got an idea from the human body, but I was the person who created it outside the human body. So the bottom line is, if you want to make some changes, you have to show your changes are the hero of the story. Okay. You have to say whatever the changes which were made were brilliant, and how brilliant it is in terms of the final end effects. If you do not do that, it will not be possible for you to sustain the application during prosecution. Any questions?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. So whenever you come with a drug product, whether it is biologicals or whether it is, a single product like a pharmaceutical product, the biggest objection which comes is Section 3D. In Section 3D, there are a lot of things. So you have to read Section 3D in 2 or 3 different manners. See, in the left-hand side, I have given the entire section. In the entire section, one portion of it, I am reading this. Here, where it is in yellow, or the mere discovery of a new property or new use of a known substance. So, which means that if you have the same substance for a different use, okay, you are not going to get a patent. The biggest example was sildenafil. Okay, even though it was a market leader in its category, we did not give a patent for it because it was a new use of a known substance. Say tomorrow we come up with, say, Taxol. Taxol is going to be active in COVID. Say Taxol is a known molecule. Even though its activity in COVID was not known, it is a new use of a known substance and it is not patentable in India under Section 3D. However, if this is really a brilliant invention, I would recommend you to file in US and Europe because US and Europe grants patents for new use of known substances. 3D, it also says another thing. The mere discovery of a known substance which does not result in the enhancement of the known efficacy. How would you read this? For example, in case of Exentin, I changed the like amino acids with like. Yes, it is a matter of routine experimentation. But if it is a matter of routine experimentation, what is the end result? Because as Louis Pasteur said, chance prepares the favored mind. Okay, so even if I made a change which was a matter of routine, the results were so different. Okay, so I have to show enhanced therapeutic efficacy. This is extremely going to be true for polymers, isomers, and other derivatives of known substance. So whenever you come up with a biotechnological sequence or a product, all of them are categorized under other derivatives of known substances. And the examiner will say, under Section 3D, you have to give me enhancement of known efficacy. There was a case which pertains to imatinib mesylate, which was fought between Novartis and many other Indian generics. Okay, Novartis was the innovator and I represented with my team one of the Indian generics, Natco. But there is a bad precedent in terms of the court decision. The court decision says very clearly you have to show enhanced therapeutic efficacy, and therapeutic efficacy does not mean pharmacokinetics. It means pharmacodynamics, which means absorption, distribution, metabolism and elimination is not sufficient to overcome the objection under Section 3D. You have to show pharmacodynamics or efficacy. So in this efficacy, in the operative part of the judgment, there is one word, in animals. So if it is possible, you have to do all the experiments in an animals. So how do you overcome this efficacy? Again, if you are having a new product, you should envisage while drafting the application that you are going to get an objection under Section 3D. In your specification only, you will place information of two. Say for example, you have one isomer, say you have two isomers, or you have one protein in the beta configuration and you have one protein in some other conformational. You test both of them. And the protein that you are claiming in terms of conformation, you have to show that it is showing better therapeutic efficacy than the protein with an unfavored conformation or the other isomer of the protein. Or if you have made some changes in the sequence and created a synthetic protein, you have to show that the original protein caused X amount of activity, whatever activity it may be, whereas the protein or the sequence or whatever you are claiming and you have changed contains much more X plus or double plus or triple plus activity than that of the original isomer. See, if you are having a new use of a known substance, we would recommend not to file in India only. Go to US, go to Europe. However, if you are having a changed or a new form of a substance or you have a derivative, then in the specification, you should place extra data comparing the original and this, and preferably in animals. I am not asking to do it in human clinical trials, at least few six animals in each group, and show that one is better than the other. Only then when the prosecution is there, you will be able to overcome this objection. Otherwise, it is simply not possible to overcome this objection. And this is extremely specific in India. US, it is a little more lenient, but Europe nowadays is also asking for similar data. Because nowadays, especially in case of small molecules, US is saying the difference in activity of isomers is known from thalidomide age. Okay, so why are you coming now to say that one isomer is better than the other? So then you have to show a huge difference in the quantum of activity, like one isomer is like 400 times or 700 times more potent than the other isomer. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult to establish. So please remember that when you have such known substances or derivative of known substances, it is important for you to place this data in the specification. The another biggest hurdle which is given in section 3D is the third part of the section 3D. If you see the yellow highlighted portion, it says 3D or the mere use of a known process. Now this becomes extremely difficult in biotechnology. Why? I exemplified something, I exemplified in PCR. I made a new antibody, I made it with a hybridoma technology. I have not invented hybridoma technology. I have not invented PCR. Okay, I did not for the first time do transformation. So the examiners say, oh, this process was very well known. Hybridoma is present, hybridoma process is present always in all textbooks. Okay. Then how do you rebut? There are two ways. One is to say that, see, I am not asking for the process. I am asking for the hybridoma per se. And hybridoma was never known. I am not asking for a method for PCR. I am asking for the product out of the PCR. Okay. Therefore, you do not bug me. Don't give me that method claim. Give me the hybridoma claim. Okay. Give me Rome, not the way to go to Rome. This is the best way to rebut to such. On other hand, supposing you made, a antibody phage display library. To construct the library, you made thousands of changes. When you made thousands of these changes, all those incremental changes had resulted in an antibody phage display library with extreme diversity and enhanced efficacy. Okay, or it gave much more better hits and it was a huge large size of naive library. Then all those incremental steps in the process you will get. Or for example, your PCR technique. I'm just theoretically giving you an example. The entire PCR textbook says that all the sequences has to be run for 8 hours and it has to be run at 25 degrees centigrade. I'm just saying. But you are, holding it in the lab in summer outside in Delhi. You say that my PCR technique does much better at 40 degrees centigrade and it is working at 10 minutes instead of 8 hours. So, and therefore, in case of diagnostic samples, instead of waiting 8 hours for every batch of samples, every 10 minutes plus washing time, I can run so many number of samples. So I have improved the technique per se, or I have deviated from the techniques which is already provided in the standard textbooks. Then you will get the method claim. Okay, but even then we recommend never ever in your specification, please write that it was done by known techniques. Okay. How about cells? Isolated, modified and stem cells. Okay. Under this, you have to see section 3J. What does section 3J says? If you have plants and animal cells, okay, other than microorganisms, in whole or any part thereof, okay, the first portion you read. So which means that if you have a microorganism, you can get a patent, assuming it is modified. If it is mere isolated, you are not going to get. However, if you get a plant or an animal in whole or any part thereof. So what the examiners are saying nowadays is that cell is a part of an animal and therefore we are not going to give you. So it is getting to be very difficult to get cells nowadays in the examination report, even though earlier people have got, recombinant strains, DNA sequences, vectors, isolates, genetically modified microorganisms. But if you are going to say, I want a CHO cell, we are finding it very difficult because this or a part thereof is being discussed as cell. There is, nowadays a book which is a guideline for examination of patents. Even though a guideline cannot supersede the act, people are saying that, oh no, the cell is a part of an animal and we are not granting it. We are still being able to obtain certain grants, but it is becoming very difficult nowadays to get. This is going to be true for your stem cells also. Whenever you're talking about stem cells, people are isolated stem cells, de novo generated stem cells, probes, which are specific for stem cells, molecule that drive self-renewal. All these are getting very, very difficult to obtain. There were processes. The processes where, isolation, generation, reduction methods, in fact, even 3D organ constructions were all possible earlier. If you can see, there were some claims which have been granted like this. See, you have to say that the stem cell has not been obtained by destruction of embryo. Otherwise, whenever they see the word stem cell, they are going to object to you under section 3B. What does section 3B says? Anything which is contrary to public order or morality will not be granted a patent. This is true considering that India kills about 10 million girls in 20 years. Okay, so how to get stem cells claims? You can write a human stem cell that is pluripotent, somatic. But look at the word non-embryonic and having the property of long-term self-renewal. So a human stem cell that is somatic, non-embryonic, so and so. Okay, or generated by a method comprising forcing the expression. See, you have to show first it is morally correct. Number 2, it is not by destruction of embryo. Okay, the number 3, you have to say that such cells which were obtained were not mere isolates, they were modification, and the modification involved a lot of human intervention. Only then there is a chance for you to get stem cells. Earlier, we had a lot of patent applications granted with the word stem cell in claims. Okay, and if you see, they were granted in US also, but Europe has never been granting stem cells. Nowadays in India also, they are taking the grounds of morality. So you should have, a good attorney along with you to fight from the beginning to get stem cells claims. Otherwise, getting stem cell claims is not easy. It is tough. Especially when you go to organs, I will show it in the next part, you get further objections. I'm showing this under method, procedures and protocols. See, there is another objection or another non-patentable section, which is section 3I, which says that method of diagnosis or treatment are not patentable. For example, when you say it is removal of cancer tumor or any surgical process, method of vaccination, that is you first give first vaccine at first month, then this next vaccination within 3 months, none of them are going to be patentable and all of them fall within the scope of section 3I of the Indian Patents Act. However, if it is done in vitro or you have any surgical or therapeutic or diagnostic, apparatus per se, those become patentable. When you go to screening also, screening, whenever you do, this screening cannot be a method of diagnosis or a method of treatment. Whenever they say a word method of diagnosis or treatment, even if it is a screening, they naturally bring it under section 3I. But it is possible to get, for example, some claims I have given, a method of screening a library of proteins to identify and or select one or more members thereof, which are candidate binding partners for one or more protein ligands comprising. And then you write whatever the ligands are. And then you write contacting a protein expression library in solution with one or more protein ligands, wherein the said protein expression library is not attached to a solid phase. This is nothing but a liquid panning. Okay, you liquid panning, you will write like this. Or say, for example, if you're screening for potential compounds, you have an anti-HIV assay and you're screening for potential compounds which fall under which may be potentially active against HIV. Such screening methods are allowed, but you have to demonstrate that they are in vitro. Whenever the word in vivo is used, it becomes 3I. Okay, so whenever you are writing a method of screening, very carefully and clearly, please add the word in vitro somewhere in your specification. Otherwise, in India at least, you are not going to be able to get. If it is only a surgical method, then again we will recommend you not to file it in Europe or India, because so far no single patent has been granted. Unless you have money to burn, don't file in Europe and India, because you're not going to get a grant for surgical method. US, yes. US is a little more lenient. Sorry. Or if you have a method of treatment, say for example in COVID, first you treat them, I don't know, with arsenic, then you treat them with something. Such methods of treatment become patentable in US. Again, it is not patentable in Europe or India. For example, this is one of the famous colleagues, one of your own colleagues, you would know. Okay. I think Dr. Mathrupurkar. Dr. Mathrupurkar was one of the first person who generated an organ from stem cells. He generated 5 organs. Okay. It was Dr. Mathrupurkar, but he did not get a patent in India because Indian Act does not permit. It does not check the quality of the science. But however, we were able to obtain patents for him in US. Okay. When you go to pharmaceuticals, any questions?
No, ma'am.
I have about 10 minutes, right? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I have the last session. See, in the last session, you have pharmaceutical patents. Pharmaceutical patents are small molecules. Though they are not strictly biotechnology, nowadays, it doesn't, there is a very small demarcation between, pharmaceutical patents and biotechnological patents. And it is very important because nowadays, most of the complementary medicines are they are one of the most used medicines. So for example, if you're going to use anything exactly from that of Ayurvedic or Unani text, you are not going to get a patent. This is how it was. There was a company called Avastigan. It is a Bangalore-based company. You might know it. They had a patent revoked under the rarest of rare category because they used a combination which was already known in Ayurveda text, even though they were the persons who proved it scientifically through lot of biologicals and other testings. They actually went to triple IM, but they made their patent attorney or somebody, they made a mistake of using the word and Ayurvedic in their claims. Okay, such patents which Ayurveda belongs to all Indians and as individuals you cannot claim it. However, if you have, purified single compounds, compositions, nutraceuticals, cosmetics, formulations, processes, you can get. Of course, in certain jurisdictions, you can get method of treatment and diagnosis. You cannot get. Whenever you think of natural products, you should think of a win-win situation. In this case, the Kani tribes, again, you must be very familiar with Kani tribes. They had a plant called Arogya Pacha. In that Arogya Pacha, they were able to, isolate, they worked with NBRA and they worked with also TBGRA. When they worked with this, they were able to isolate one particular ingredient which became adaptogenic. So they were able to do NBA, they were able to sell the product and the proceeds they were able to give job to the Kani tribes also. And the Kani tribes grew Arogya Pacha and cultivated Arogya Pacha, and it became a win-win situation for the institutes and the tribes. Okay, so if you are thinking of natural products, especially if you are thinking of indigenous resources of natural products, this is how you need to see. Whenever you use natural product, the objection that would come would be section 3P, which is under traditional knowledge. So if you see in turmeric, there was a huge problem. This was in which, somebody else outside India tried to patent turmeric. Okay, so here it was a great, I will go into the case law if anybody is interested. But after this, it is very clear that if it falls under traditional knowledge, there is a TKDA library which is available online. If it is anywhere present in the TKDA library or any Ayurvedic, Unani, homeopathy text, you are not going to get a patent out of it. So in this, you always have to show that you have one ingredient or one technique which is beyond that of the entire Ayurveda per se. Only then you are going to get a patent under this. So this is a summary. So if you see, there are many places where you are not going to get patents. Okay, in India. Of course, in many other places, you can change the jurisdictions and get a patent. But as biotechnology, you have to know that what is going to be your subject matter. And if you know what is your subject matter, you first of all have to write it as a human intervention, not a mere discovery or a mere isolate from nature. Also, you have to show, you have to predict what non-patentable objection is going to come apart from novelty and inventor step. And whatever supporting data you will require during the prosecution to overcome such non-patentable rejection, you should place in your patent specification well in advance. Okay, so thank you. We still have a few minutes. If anybody has any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you, ma'am, for that very informative talk, very elaborate. Participants, if you have any queries, questions, please post your questions, or you can unmute yourself and ask. Participants, any questions? Looks like there are no questions, ma'am.
If you still have any questions beyond this, my email ID is there on the slide. People are free to write to me and I'll try to answer as soon as possible.
Thank you, ma'am. Now that we've come to the end of the session, I'd like to extend our gratitude to Dr. Chitra for taking her time out from a busy schedule and making herself available for this FDP program and giving a very elaborate talk on specifically what terms should be used and what should not be used. I myself was not very much aware that these are the terminologies which should not be used in patent drafting. Thank you, ma'am. That was really very informative. I hope our students as well as other faculty participants have benefited out of it. So on behalf of the staff, student and management, I, Salma, take it a privilege to extend our heartfelt gratitude and a thank you to Dr. Chitra for delivering this expert lecture. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all for such patient listening.
Dear